So to introduce inspirational leadership, what I'm first going to do is just talk about emotional intelligence, because inspirational leadership is one of the 12 competencies detailed in the Hay Group, Daniel Goleman research, and also in the product offer by Hay Group on ESCI, which is Emotional and Social Competence Inventory. And I'm an accredited ESCI person, so I do emotional intelligence with people and develop their emotional intelligence through a range of coaching processes, of which one is inspirational leadership, which I'm sharing today. So just to recap, emotional intelligence is broken up into these 4 areas: self-awareness, other awareness, and self-management and relationship management. The idea is that with better relationship management driven by each of those other 3 emotional intelligence areas, we can actually deliver high performance sustainably without burning people out, and it can be fun and good for people. So if we look at those 4 categories, they break down into these 12 competencies. So the first one is emotional self-awareness. Sits by itself, and there's 1 competence. There are 4 under the self-management, and what's interesting is that the second one, achievement orientation, is very much driven by whether you do what you say, whether you deliver what your aims are in your own performance plan. So it's very much driven by results. So it's surprising that emotional intelligence has such a strong focus in that area. So in addition, we've got adaptability, emotional self-control, and a comment about emotional self-control is it doesn't mean that you're a robot. You need to be able to express your emotions so other people know what's going on. And very important. So the third area is social awareness, and that's broken up by 2 competencies, which includes empathy and organisational awareness. As we'll see, empathy often ranks very, very low in organisational life. And the last area, which has 5 competencies, is in this relationship management area. Incorporates conflict, the capability to work in conflict and resolve conflict, to be a coach and mentor, which is like a leadership style, your ability to influence people, which is once again a leadership style, inspirational leadership as a competency that impacts on you, your team, your area, the organisation, and lastly, teamwork. So one of the challenges there, and what we see with emotionally intelligent people, is that they're capable of not being triggered into action. They're actually aware, emotionally self-aware of what pushes their button, and they can have their button pushed but not respond out of that moment. I was watching something about one of the Buddhist monks, and they were talking about the monkey mind, which is always going. And emotionally intelligent people find innovative ways to meditate just simply by breathing or going for a walk or getting themselves out of that reactive mindset. Might be simply breathing. But the challenge with emotionally intelligent people is that they can see the consequences of their actions, and so therefore can see more of the system in organisational life, which makes them more capable of being what they need to be to get the outcome required. So moving on, one example of some emotional intelligence work that I've completed with a client. You can see those 12 competencies on the left-hand side, and you look at how many individuals had those strengths. So in this group of 12 people, no one had emotional self-awareness and no one had empathy. Achievement orientation was high, emotional self-control was high, and teamwork was high. So a mix of competencies, and as a group of people, they identified that the most important thing for them as leaders of a supply chain, of a multi-billion-dollar supply chain, was inspirational leadership. Only 2 of the people had those as strengths, and so that was the #1 priority from the group. And as you can see, followed by emotional self-awareness, and then developing the capability for empathy. And so I designed a program for this group of people whereby we could develop people's inspirational leadership, and that's what we're going to talk about. So in the A Group ESCI process, these are the 5 questions that are asked around inspirational leadership. And what I did was then develop that up to another level and just created some questions that allowed each of the people to respond and to identify whether they're doing it all the time and giving themselves a 4 out of 4, or whether they're doing it some of the time or none of the time. And I developed 24 questions here, and over the page I've just highlighted number 16 there, which is the need to be open and transparent. So inspirational people often don't surprise anybody, and you can actually predict what they're going to be because they've got some emotional intelligence and they actually think through what they need to be successful. To take someone on a strategic journey like a partnering relationship, for example. Continuing on with the rest of those questions, and now I provide these questions so you may be able to, after this webinar, actually document where you think you're at with inspirational leadership. So you'll get a copy of these slides, mark yourself out of 4 for each of the questions, and actually see how you go in terms of your own inspirational leadership, and your scoring may then tell you what you need to work on. And I'm very happy to interact with people if they'd like to put some focus in any of those areas. So, as an example, this group of people that I mentioned before in the case study, they all filled out that diagnostic, and the results were that the average score was 75%, and there was one person who rated themselves 98%, and interestingly, that person was the only one who was an inspirational leader in the emotional intelligence 360-degree survey result that those individuals and team received. There were 2 people in the 60s and the rest were in the 70s. Now, this is a group of people who are leading a few thousand people. So inspirational leadership is actually a critical competency for these leaders. So once again, you may calculate your score and look at what you can do, because the interesting aspect here is that the inspirational leader of this group of people was actually my client in a collaborative or partnering venture with a third-party provider. And that's what we're going to move on to now. So you've got to be inspirational leader to take on a partnering relationship, because it demands of you something different than the average day-to-day, because you need to be able to work with other organisations and be able to maintain constructive relationship while there will be very difficult challenges in the process. So it needs some inspirational leadership to be able to hold that partnering relationship to deliver long-term value to both organisations. And the reality is sometimes one person may have a little bit more capability and they may actually hold the relationship. So it might be a client who works with a third-party provider and they actually maintain the partnership relationship, and over time people within the third party develop competency around emotional intelligence who then step into that partnering relationship. So there is a dynamic there. It's not black and white. It is a dynamic system that actually plays itself out.